house on Harrow's Lane. The house on Harrow's Lane had stood empty for as long as anyone in the small town of Millbridge could remember. The townspeople would whisper about it in hushed tones, always with a glance over their shoulders, as if the house itself might overhear. No one knew exactly when it had been built, or by whom, but the stories about it were well known, stories about strange sounds in the night, lights flickering in windows that should have been empty, and the terrible smell of decay that sometimes drifted out from behind its weathered walls. It was said to be cursed. To the outside world, it was just another decaying building, but to those who lived in Millbridge, it was an unspoken warning. No one dared go near it. And yet, on a crisp fall evening, when the wind had picked up and the sun was setting behind a blanket of thick clouds, a new family arrived in town, the Lawson family. They were young, eager to start fresh after moving from the city, seeking the peace and quiet of rural life. They didn't know the history of Harrow's Lane, and they certainly didn't know about the house that stood at the end of the road. So when they were told by the local real estate agent that the house was available for rent, they were thrilled. It was a large, stately home, with ivy-covered stone walls, grand windows, and a towering spire that rose against the sky like something out of an old fairy tale. On the first night, as the Lawson family unloaded their belongings, the house felt cold, even though the sun had barely set. A sharp chill seemed to seep from the walls, and the floorboards groaned under their feet, as if the house was alive and groaning at the weight of its new inhabitants. But it was nothing more than the usual creaks of an old building, they told themselves. Nothing to worry about. The first sign that something was wrong came when the family sat down for dinner that evening. They gathered around the large oak dining table in the kitchen, a place that seemed more than large enough for the family of four. But as they ate, a soft, rhythmic sound started up, thump, 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 coming from somewhere in the house. It was faint at first, like the tapping of a far-off drum, but it slowly grew louder, until it felt as though it was right above their heads. "Do you hear that?" Emma, the youngest, asked, her wide eyes full of confusion. "It's just the house settling," her mother, Claire, said with a strained smile. But she couldn't help glancing at her husband, Mark. The tapping was odd, and it made her stomach churn. Mark set his fork down and rose from the table. "I'll check it out. It's probably just rats or something." He moved through the hallways, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. The house felt wrong. But he told himself it was nothing. It had been empty for so long, of course it would make strange noises. Yet, as he moved toward the attic stairs, the sound grew louder. It was no longer a tap. It was a thump, a heavy, deliberate thump, as if someone was pacing back and forth in the attic, dragging something heavy behind them. Mark hesitated before ascending the stairs. The door to the attic was old and warped, and the air in the small room was thick with dust. He gripped the brass handle, his palm sweaty, and pulled it open. The attic was empty. But something was there. At the far end of the room, tucked into the corner behind a stack of old furniture, was a small, wooden chest. It wasn't unusual, old houses always have forgotten trunks and crates. But this chest, it was different. It seemed too new for the house, as if it had been placed there just that morning. The thumping sound had come from this chest. Mark approached it slowly, each step measured. His heartbeat was the loudest thing in the room as he crouched before the chest and reached out to open it. But before he could lift the lid, he heard a voice, a whisper, soft but clear, just behind him. "Leave." He froze, his hands still on the chest. The air felt thick, heavy, and cold, like something was closing in around him. His mind screamed at him to run, but his body was frozen in place. The whisper came again, this time louder. "Leave this house, or it will take you." Mark whipped around, but there was no one behind him. Just the empty attic, dark and still. The chest, however, was now open. The lid was cracked, and inside was nothing but darkness. He slammed the chest shut and ran back downstairs, the thumping growing louder behind him, as though something was chasing him down the stairs. His heart was racing. When he returned to the dining room, he found his family staring at him in silence. The rhythmic thump had stopped. "What's wrong?" Claire asked. her voice tight with concern. "There's something in the attic," Mark said, his voice shaking. "Something, it's not right." That night, as they went to bed, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching them. She pulled the covers up to her chin and lay in the dark, listening to the strange creaks of the house around her. But the strangest sound came from the walls. It was like whispers. Muffled voices, low and unintelligible, as though a conversation was happening just beyond her reach. The sound slithered through the walls like something alive. The next morning, Mark went into town to speak with the locals, hoping to find some answers. But when he asked about the house, the townspeople grew uneasy. No one spoke openly about Harrow's Lane. They all knew the stories, but they avoided them, as if acknowledging them might make them real. Finally, an elderly man named Mr. Hawkins leaned in close, his eyes darting around to make sure no one was listening. "Years ago, a family lived in that house," he whispered. "They vanished without a trace. No one knows what happened to them. But every night, they would hear the whispers, the footsteps on the stairs, the tapping on the walls. They said the house was hungry." "Hungry?" Mark repeated. "A house like that doesn't just sit empty for long," Mr. Hawkins said. "It feeds off the living. And when it's starving, it calls for new blood." Mark's blood ran cold. That night, he told his family they had to leave, but it was too late. The house had already claimed them. In the days that followed, things grew darker. At night, the whispers became louder. The tapping turned into banging, as if something, or someone, was trying to break through the walls. The windows rattled as if something outside was pressing against them. Claire, Emma, and Mark all had nightmares, horrible dreams in which they were trapped in the house, unable to escape. It wasn't long before they realized there was no escape. Every time they tried to leave, they found themselves right back inside, as if the house itself was warping reality around them. The doors led to rooms that weren't there, and the windows showed nothing but endless dark. One evening, as the family huddled together in the corner of the dining room, the air grew frigid. The whispers came again, louder than before. And this time, they were clear. "You are ours now." Suddenly, the room went black, and they felt the weight of unseen hands closing around them. The last thing Mark remembered before the darkness took him was the sound of the chest creaking open once more. The next morning, the house on Harrow's Lane stood silent and empty. The Lawson family was never seen again. As the years passed, the house slowly began to fade into ruin. The whispers, though, still echoed on the wind, reaching the ears of anyone who dared to listen.